We've got thousands of people in this stadium who most of them play tennis. The serve's really a tough thing for them. Could you just give them like a 1-minute service clinic and a couple of just thoughts on how they can improve their serve?
Well, but look, I think it's very important to have a good ball toss. Sometimes people think it's just a swing, but I really think the ball toss actually creates the entire motion after that. I think elbow high.
Now, you have heard it from the greatest of them all himself, that the most important part of the serve is the toss of the ball. Without Roger's knowledge or his permission, naturally, I'd like to take the liberty of elaborating on this rather curious statement of his, taking him at his word, and treating it not as just another sweet nothing coming from just another celebrity, but rather as a true insight, a nugget of wisdom shared by a great master, sketchy and cryptic, but nevertheless worthy of our keen attention and thoughtful consideration. Here, I would venture to guess that he is not talking about the manner in which the ball is being tossed, but rather the place where it is tossed. To be more precise, it is where the ball ends up in relation to the swing path of the racket at the very moment of its impact. In other words, where the tire meets the road, the very point which will determine the ball's direction and its ultimate destination. Here is the demonstration of 3 different toss placements and their effects on the ball's direction. It is important to note that, in all 3 cases, the force of the swing and its path are identical. The only variable here is the position of the ball itself. This is what the swing path of the racket looks like, or rather, what it should look like. The consistency of the serve depends mainly on the player's ability to produce exactly the same swing path as humanly possible, time after time. Simplifying the overall mechanics and getting rid of all the unnecessary impediments is the only way of getting it done. Of course, it's easy for a steel ruler to do this. Not so for a human body, which is always tempted to be led astray by the mind of its own, not to mention by some rather dubious outside suggestions. One such familiar suggestion is to toss the ball forward into the court. The first thing which is needed for a good swing is the foundation from which the swing action would be launched. This foundation must be balanced, stable, and comfortable. These are the examples of such foundations. And these are not. The moment the ball is tossed into the court, the first thing you can kiss goodbye to is this very foundation. Because, just to keep the ball within reach, the player has no choice but but to go after it by stretching and leaning the torso forward. Here, her torso is already fully extended, but as you can see, she is nowhere near to contacting the ball yet. The obvious consequence of such reaching and leaning is that these players are no longer able to propel the racket with their torsos thrust. In this position, the player's torso becomes fully immobilized, with no way to maneuver. The only remaining option for these players is to use their shoulder muscles. Of course, the power of the shoulder does not come even close to what the abdominal group of muscles can deliver. So, to compensate for this power deficiency, the snapping or flapping of the wrist is proposed as a clever solution to the problem. This simple trick certainly helps to increase the racket speed. But opening this can of worms doesn't remedy the situation in the least, since all this ingenuity comes at a cost. The cost of stressing the wrist and of diminishing the ball control by needlessly complicating the whole process, which now requires arranging and synchronizing all of these separate moving parts into a single, unified action. To execute this consistently, even under the ideal circumstances, would be rather difficult proposition, let alone when your body is tittering, or is already in a state of falling over. And thus, the self-inflicted agonies persist. The main problem is not that people are not able to do enough of something, but that they usually are trying to do too much for their own good. With so many options to choose from when it comes to capabilities of the body, but with no definite idea of what to do with it all, most players end up crafting the situation where the body simply gets in its own way. The ball toss definitely is the linchpin of the serve. This seemingly innocuous part of the whole action, if allowed, can instantly become the tail which wags the dog. And then, the proverbial monkey wrench, which first diminishes the power of the swing, second undermines the ability to control and reliably deliver the ball, and last but not least, puts the wrist and the shoulder of the server in real jeopardy.
Your work is ingenious. It's quality work. And there are simply too many notes. That's all. Just cut a few and it'll be perfect.
Grazie, signore.